G'day mate, 40 here. So I'm looking at the Financial Times, and the author of this Financial Times article says, he talks about the storming of Capitol Hill, and so he got in contact with Ali Soufan, the celebrated former FBI counterterrorism agent, and Ali Soufan says that the January 6th storming of Capitol Hill will act as a recruiting sergeant for many more thugs. And he likened the storming of the American Capitol to Al Qaeda's 1993 attack on the World Trade Center. And so the implication is that the FBI and others need to act now to prevent America's domestic terrorist threat from metastasizing into September 11, 2001 style ambitions. So I think absolutely that there are people on the dissident sphere who would be fine with some kind of radical, devastating attack on America. Like there's so much rage out there, so much belief that the election was stolen, that the system is rigged, that when people feel like victims, they then feel that there are no longer any moral responsibilities, that there's nothing that holds them back from what they want to do. So yeah, I think it's reasonable to look at the January 6th Capitol Hill attack as akin to Al Qaeda's 1993 attack on the World Trade Center. There could be something a whole lot worse, and this January 6th attack could very well serve as a recruiting vehicle. So I don't think we've heard the end from the QAnon crazy people. Anyway, Ali Soufan said what happened January 6th on Capitol Hill, it's not the end, it's the beginning. If we pretend nothing happened, chaos we've seen will come back more lethal and more dangerous than before. So then the author calls Richard Spencer, America's best known alt-righter, who's yet to be banned from Twitter. And it turns out there's a reason for that. Richard Spencer infamously gave a Nazi salute at a Washington event shortly before Donald Trump's inauguration in 2017. Okay, this is factually incorrect. Richard Spencer did not give any Nazi salute. He simply raised a glass and said, "Hail victory, hail our people. Hail Trump, hail victory, hail our people." So absolutely nothing, not true. Spencer never infamously gave a Nazi salute, so this is just widespread misinformation. But Spencer has encouraged dozens of people to give him Heil Hitler salutes, and he's kind of reveled in that. This is interesting. Spencer still describes himself as an identitarian. And this is what makes Spencer so good at live streaming, is that he often tells the truth, even when it's damaging to him and to the causes that he espouses. So I'm not saying Richard always tells the truth. I'm not saying Richard's just a compulsive truth teller. I'm saying that he sometimes tells the truth to a disarming degree, even when it's damaging to him and to his cause, like when he admitted approximately 2 years ago that Antifa had won, that in the battles between the alt-right and Antifa, he said Antifa won, and they had. So he was admitting the truth. That makes him more persuasive as a live streamer. So Richard voted for Joe Biden November 3rd. He voted straight ticket Democrat. And then he said, "Trump brought out the worst aspects in me. That's not what I want to be remembered for." So I don't recall Richard ever saying that sort of thing before. Trump brought out the worst aspects in me. That's not what I want to be remembered for. So that makes sense. I don't think he's blaming Trump. So by saying that, like, Luke Ford brought out the worst in me, or playing cricket brought out the worst in me, or drinking brought out the worst in me, I don't think that is saying that you're blaming the other person. Just saying that they bring out the worst in you is acknowledging that you've got some really bad stuff inside, and other people can absolutely bring it out. Otherwise, it might stay silent. For example, a lot of people are perfectly nice as long as they're not drinking. Once they start drinking, then they become very nasty. Right? So I don't agree with Greg Johnson. So Greg Johnson's commentary was that Richard was introducing the Trump made me do it defense, and I don't think that's what Richard's doing here. He's not using the Trump made me do it, but this is important. Trump brought out the worst aspects in me. That's not what I want to be remembered for, Spencer said. I recognized the toxicity of right-wing populism and didn't want America to go further down that road. And Richard said that the January 6th protesters, that there was a hardcore of genuinely violent types, but the majority were juvenile posers. That makes sense. A lot of them see politics as a kind of video game, like shooting Nazi zombies in some kind of World War II gaming scenario. That rings true. You can see how unrealistic they are by the fact that they're still openly boasting on social media about what they did. They don't seem to realize that the law is coming for them, which it is. So, what do you think of this line here? Trump brought out the worst aspects in me. That's not what I want to be remembered for. I recognize the toxicity of right-wing populism and didn't want America to go further down that road. So I think that's true. I think Trump brought out the worst in some people who either supported him or opposed him. Right? Trump has been a tremendous source of energy for people over the past 5 years. And often that energy or that provocation has led them to do things that they later regret. So I think this is an example of Richard being honest here to a fault, in that even though it makes him look bad, even though it makes perhaps his movement look bad, he's willing to say what he believes to be true. Now, what could it be about Trump that brings out the worst in someone? Well, Trump is vulgar, Trump is childish, Trump is, often inappropriate. He does say, some horrible things. All right. So he kind of could encourage in some people, parts of themselves that would be better repressed. So in normal conventions, courtesy typically depends upon us repressing all sorts of things that are just instinctual to us. Like common courtesies, civility requires that we don't say everything that's on top of our mind. So what makes Trump so compelling and also so possibly toxic at times is his tendency to just blurt out whatever's on top of his mind. So I think Trump probably functioned for some people akin to alcohol. So some people alcohol makes them more fun. Some people alcohol makes them less repressed, more human. They become more pleasant to be around when they've had a few drinks. And other people, alcohol makes them worse. So I think that's true with Trump. He's probably made some people better, some people worse. And I don't think this is an absurd observation from Richard that Trump made him worse, that Trump brought out the worst aspects in him. So definitely not just the substances we drink or the substances we consume or the substances that we shoot, but also the people that we're around or the context in which we're around has a profound effect on us. Like some people are one way when they're in church and a completely different way when they're in the strip club. Some people are one way when they're in a synagogue and a completely different way when they're negotiating for a loan at the bank. So what could possibly be toxic here about right-wing populism? Well, I see the toxic downsides to right-wing populism all the time here on this show. And I'm not saying that right-wing populism is toxic. I'm saying everything's got the potential to be either toxic or positive. And it'll depend a lot on the person. So first of all, the type of person who's going to be tremendously affected by Donald Trump or by circumstance is going to be someone who's unstable. So it's going to be someone who's narcissistic in particular. So I remember when I was really in the grip of narcissism, I'd continually contort myself to try to extract the maximum of attention. So until the last few years, I didn't really know who I was. And so I was very changeable in different contexts, right? So what kind of person is, completely, constantly contorting themselves to try to extract the most attention out of a situation? It's someone who's unstable, often someone who's prone to narcissism, grandiosity, borderline personality disorder, some of the basic personality disorders. So most people don't change as dramatically as, say, Richard Spencer, right? Most people have not become toxic because of Donald Trump. So anyone who's become toxic because of Donald Trump, this is someone who's fundamentally dangerous, someone who is unmoored, someone who's not rooted in reality, someone who's not consistent. So it used to be I was just completely different people in different aspects of my life. Like I'd go to synagogue for a Talmud class and then pray morning prayers, put on tefillin, and I'd be one person. Then I'd drive to a porn set and I'd be a different person. Then I'd go to an LA Press Club event, be a different person. So some degree of changing to adapt to your circumstance is healthy. But when you are changing to adapt to a circumstance so much that it contradicts other things that you stand for, so that your life, different parts of your life are at war with each other, then we're talking about something that's toxic. And so I see with some people who get into right-wing populism, it develops in them, all sorts of crazy conspiracy theories. It makes them liable to believe that the CIA killed John F. Kennedy, or to believe in the QAnon conspiracy, or that massive voter fraud decided the 2020 election, the American presidential election, for which we don't have any evidence of that as yet. So I notice right-wing populism, it does make some people worse. So it probably makes some people better, but I've definitely seen through my interactions online how right-wing populism's made people worse. It's made them instinctively hate the elites. It's made them believe in ridiculous conspiracy theories such as like the elites hate you and want you dead. It makes people, distrust any mainstream news source. It leads people to a life of trolling, right? So the trolling gets out of control, and then everything you do online is going to feed back into your regular life. It's not like online is separate from your real life. Online is a facet of your real life, and the things that you say in this chat, things that you say on 4chan or 8chan, they're going to feed back into your real life. Just like if you look at pornography, or if you don't look at pornography, that's going to affect your interactions with people. Everything we do affects other people. Like how you spend your spare time in the privacy of your room. If you choose to listen to rap music or you choose to listen to classical music, that's going to have an effect on you, which will then affect other people. So I notice a lot of people who get into right-wing populism, they use it as an excuse. I don't need to read books anymore. Just going to listen to podcasts or YouTube live streams. It becomes knee-jerk anti-intellectual. It involves a knee-jerk suspicion of elites or anyone who's got credentials. It means, I'm just going to dismiss anything from the mainstream media. If New York Times says it, it's a lie. If it comes from the Washington Post or the LA Times or CNN or ABC News, it's just automatically a lie. And that's obviously ridiculous. So right-wing populism can attract a toxic crowd. It can lead people down a path towards ridiculous conspiracy theories that then lead to antisocial and self-destructive behavior, such as what we saw January 6th on Capitol Hill. Now, every type of politics and every type of religion comes with downsides. So if I mention that there are some downsides and some weaknesses with embracing right-wing populism, it doesn't mean that I think that all the alternatives to that they're just pure, that they're just sunshine and all things wonderful. No, obviously every politics, every religion comes with downside. But I don't think Richard is being ridiculous here when he says that Trump brought out the worst aspects in me. Like, I'm sure there are a lot of people who felt like Trump freed them from being civil, felt like Trump freed them to go troll. A lot of people thought that by trolling they were making America a better place. A lot of people thought that by attacking journalists and sending, horrible death threat messages to journalists, that somehow they were making the world a better place. A lot of people bought into Trump's line, the media, the enemy of the people, and then they seized on that by ignoring, strong sources of information, and then by being, a jerk to journalists. Like that massive destruction of property, January 6th, like destroying journalists' equipment, right? If right-wing populism leads you to break the law, to steal, to destroy, to self-destruct, to make other people feel unsafe, to associate with people who are intent on doing, grievous bodily harm, then obviously right-wing populism's led you in a bad direction. So right-wing populism can lead to a feeling of smugness, that you can just ignore what the elites are saying, that you're just smarter than them, that you just know their grift, you just know that they're out to hurt you or to kill you or to take advantage of you. So these kind of knee-jerk reactions are toxic. I do see how destructive they can be. So Richard said, Trump brought out the worst aspects in me. It's not what I want to be remembered for. I recognize the toxicity of right-wing populism, didn't want America to go further down that road. So listening to the Steve Bannon War Room, I think probably overall probably does you more harm than good. Probably warps your perceptions of reality and leaves you wide open for even more destructive ways of living. So also right-wing populism, along with many different approaches to life, many different ideologies, anything that develops a victim complex has vast potential to be destructive, right? So right-wing populism, Black Lives Matter, Antifa, all these mindsets tend to inculcate in people a victim mindset. Once you perceive you and your group as a victim, then you're very likely to behave without regard to moral norms. And then you're going to become both self-destructive and destructive to other people. So you take on a type of politics that leads you into a sense of victimhood, then it can very well make you a worse person. Like sometimes for some people, converting to Christianity makes them a worse person. They become so obnoxious and so self-righteous that you kind of wish that they would revert back to when they were secular. For other people, converting to Judaism can make them a worse person, right? It's not like there's any religion or politics that people can shift to that automatically makes people better. And so trolling, I think that's one of the big dangers of people becoming interested in the distant right, that it inculcates this feeling of, oh, isn't it great that I made someone hurt, that I offended someone, that I made them feel unsafe. When you're deliberately hurting people, when you're deliberately offending someone, you are hurting them, and then you are getting a high from hurting people. You really don't want to develop an addictive high to hurt people. And think of that Ashley Babbitt. She embraced QAnon. She didn't start off embracing QAnon. She started off embracing right-wing populism and Trump. That led to QAnon and Stop the Steal. She ends up losing her life. A lot of people spend a lot more time online in these virtual communities because they've embraced, say, right-wing populism or distant right politics. And it's through going online that they find it easier to be with people with a similar politics. But obviously for some people, spending more time online is going to be destructive for them. I remember I came to UCLA in August of 1988, about a month before the dormitories opened up, and they were playing a major tennis tournament at UCLA at the time, and I was trying to watch the semifinals from this outlook that was, it was raised up above the stadium. And a group of us would go, to this wooded raised area above the stadium to try to watch the tennis for free. And eventually law enforcement came out and said, hey, you can't be here. And there was in this confrontation, someone slipped and was, in danger of falling off the edge, right, and hurting themselves. And so until that point, I've been kind of ambivalent about the stand-up. But as soon as that happened, I said, hey, we should get out of here, right? So you can fall into a group, an antisocial group, and you may not even realize it. But then when you start seeing, oh, this person, this law officer, he almost slipped and fell, could have died or suffered major injury from this confrontation that I'm taking part in. And what's this whole confrontation for? So that I can watch a tennis match for free, fallen in with an antisocial group. So just discovering a fact about history or a theory, it can warp you. It can lead you down dangerous paths. So am I saying don't learn any theories, don't learn any facts? No. But people who are unstable, people who are volatile, like a Richard Spencer, and how I think I was for much of my life. You can just stumble on one piece of knowledge, one insight, one fact, and you can just go off half cocked. You can just seize this one little thing and pursue it to absurd ends. And so I think that's some of what Richard is talking about here. For some people, right-wing populism has become a mechanism for self-destruction. For other people, dissident right politics has become a mechanism for self-destruction. For other people, Antifa or Black Lives Matter become mechanisms for self-destruction. So if there's an emptiness in your life that Donald Trump fills, either through loving him or hating him, or if there's an emptiness in your life that QAnon fills, or that trolling fills, or participating in like dissident right chat boards, if that fills and makes you feel alive, then that's dangerous, right? People who are that empty can then just seize on anything that comes along that makes them feel alive. So we all exert a force field, right? When Dennis Prager walks into a room, people are changed. Like, people behave more respectfully, people speak more politely. Like, we all exert a force field, and we affect other people. So this is a long way from saying you give someone a podcast and it turns them into zombies. So, okay, I'm not advocating the zombie theory of information, but there's a big difference between the zombie bite theory of information and then saying we have no effect on other people. How about a moderate position, just recognizing that we all exert a force field, we all affect other people. All of us have someone who looks up to us. Some of us may have half a dozen people who look up to us. And to the extent that we affect other people, we need to, of course, be cognizant that we're having a positive effect on people, not a negative effect. And Trump has had a positive effect on Republicans in the sense that he's taught them how to fight, and he's also had a negative effect by pushing bogus theories like voter fraud, the system is fixed, and his general incivility. So I'm not coming down in this stream saying Trump is good or Trump is bad, just recognizing that Trump, like alcohol, lets things loose in people. And sometimes what is let loose is good, and sometimes what is let loose is bad. In the case of Richard Spencer, what it let loose was something that was both self-destructive and socially destructive. So I think we should think about the force field that we exert, right? The influence that we have over other people. What happens when you walk into a room? So when I walk into a room, people feel more free to say inappropriate things. You don't teach people how to fight. You taught them nothing. They are motivated by their prospective donors. Okay, I generally appreciate your nihilism, but I think that goes way too far. It's not, or Republicans are not just motivated by their donors. Okay, Trump presented a right-wing populist message that, if executed competently, could well be a winning formula for Republicans for decades to come. So Trump tapped into something. Trump did some good with his time in office. He was able to communicate effectively about issues that are vitally important to many Americans who were previously feeling ignored. So how about we appreciate the good things that Trump did, see what we can learn from what Trump said and did that worked in a positive direction, as well as learning what were the self-destructive, socially destructive, negative things that Trump said and did. QAnon is about giving people hope. If you truly listen to the message, it's basically saying being aware that we're going to solve our problems. Yeah, so not everything that gives you hope is good for you. Like, a lot of things that give you hope are toxic, and QAnon has definitely been a toxic force. Like, if you're going to spend that much time on something that's so out of touch with reality, like, it's at best a waste of time. Now, I like Godward Podcast. I like the guy behind Godward Podcast. I like some of his tweets. I like some of his shows. I like some of his podcasts. I've been friendly with Godward Podcast for approximately 15 years. But man, there is a high percentage of craziness on Godward Podcast. And just some of it's toxic. So a lot of it's great. A lot of it's doesn't go in any direction. And then some of it's just toxic. So January 16th, Godward Podcast tweeted, "It's only legal to have a job in America if you're a complete idiot or phony. And being a phony takes a serious psychological toll." So Godward Podcast is milky. Like, we've done YouTube shows together for years. But think about this tweet. It's only legal to have a job in America if you're a complete idiot or phony. That's nonsense. That bears no relationship to reality. He's essentially stigmatizing and despising and talking down at people who work. It's only legal to have a job in America if you're a complete idiot or a phony. So someone has a job as a plumber. Like, how are they a complete idiot or a phony? Being a phony takes a serious psychological toll. So we often don't see the world as the world is, we see the world as we are. So if let's say Godward Podcast lost a job, then a coping mechanism could be to say, oh, it's only legal to have a job in America if you're a complete idiot or phony. But it's simply not true. There's nothing that you can do that's going to be so consistently good for you and for your family and for the world than having a job that is legal. Right? It's only legal to have a job in America if you're a complete idiot or a phony, and being a phony takes a serious psychological toll. Thank you, Abu Jacko. So working is good. Working is really good. There's nothing you can do that has such a positive effect on you like work, hard work, right? And it's good for your family. You're taking care of yourself. You're providing yourself with health insurance and savings for bad times. And so, I understand Godward Podcast may be ticked off about certain things that may have happened to him. But to say it's only legal to have a job in America if you're a complete idiot or a phony, yeah, being unemployed takes a much bigger toll on you than being employed. Being a phony takes a serious psychological toll. Yeah, but you're not being a phony if you abstain from, say, storming the Capitol. All right, a lot of people lost their jobs for storming Capitol Hill on January 6th, doing something that was illegal. All right, you're not a phony if you abstain from that sort of self-destructive behavior. You're not a phony if you don't flash your penis online. You're not a phony if you don't make sex tapes and release them online. You're not a phony if you don't cover your face with feces and take pictures of it and post it to Twitter. All right? So being honest doesn't mean you need to talk about everything in the workplace. Being honest doesn't mean you need to talk about everything online. Okay, there's nothing phony about abstaining from smearing yourself with feces and going for a walk down the street. All right, that's just crazy. So Godward Podcast, some of his tweets are the equivalent of like smearing his face with feces and taking a walk down the street. Now, some of it's excellent. All right, so he's got a lot of learning that I don't have in many areas. This is not a slam on Godward Podcast. This is a targeted critique on a handful of tweets that I think are just delusional, but they feed into a delusional mindset that seems to be fed by aspects of right-wing populism. So just as Donald Trump may well have brought out the worst aspects of Richard Spencer, this distant right sphere brings out the worst aspects in people, so that it gets to where people don't want to even hold a job. They just want to be thought leaders. right? So this is the Eli Mosley approach. Like he glommed on to Samantha when he lost his job and moved in with her, but he didn't want to take a job. He just wanted to be a thought leader. Just wanted to be a thought leader. So he'd just go on podcasts all day. And Eli Mosley had this same point of view here as Godward Podcast. It's only legal to have a job in America if you're a complete idiot or a phony. Being a phony takes a serious psychological toll. So instead, we're just going to be thought leaders. Instead, we're just going to all release podcasts. Like having a job means you're willing to subordinate your ego and your preferences to carry out the preferences of somebody else for a set amount of time. That means that for 40 hours a week or 20 hours a week, you put your boss's preferences above yours. It means for a few hours a day, you put your customers' preferences before your own. For a few hours a day, you abstain from talking about things that would be divisive, upsetting, or harming morale in the workplace so that you can get along with other people, allow them to do their job so they can feed their families, while you do your job so you can feed your family. That's not being a phony, right? You don't have to reveal everything about yourself, and you don't have to reveal every thought you've ever had online to avoid being a phony. So Abu Jacko says, Luke, are you planning to write another book? I feel that your advice on getting your priorities in life right deserves a wide readership. Thank you very much. I don't currently have any plans, but I do jot down notes on these things that I talk about. And I've got dozens and dozens of pages of notes, so I may well write more. Smearing feces on your face and walking down the street. I missed that news story. It's a metaphor. It's a metaphor if you want to publicly embrace National Socialism in the West, in an Anglo country, that you're doing the equivalent of smearing feces on your face and walking down the street. A lot of populist politics, right and left, especially online, is this educated, socially precarious social class who couldn't find careers in the touted knowledge economy. Yeah. And so they spend their time sometimes producing useful content that has a good effect on them and on others, and then sometimes producing socially toxic content. So this tweet that it's only legal to have a job in America if you're a complete idiot or a phony, and being a phony takes a serious psychological toll. To denigrate work like that, to denigrate America like that, to tell people essentially they shouldn't put others' needs ahead of theirs, that they shouldn't devote a few hours of the day providing for their families by putting customers' needs first, or putting an employer's needs first, or putting clients' needs first, because that's being a phony. I mean, this is just incredibly toxic point of view that is unfortunately widespread in the dissident right. So many people in the dissident right think that they're above holding a job, that they just want to be thought leaders, that to not tell everybody everything is somehow being a phony. You're not being a phony by holding back on saying certain things publicly. You're not being a phony by not talking politics in the workplace. So here, I'll put a link to this Godward Podcast tweet. So again, I think there's a lot of excellent stuff on Godward Podcast. So he's kind of high risk, high reward. So I think he's deadly wrong in some things, and very interesting in other things. So he's talking about lockdowns. This is going to end with the worst possible compromise. The governments will allow us a short carnival season every year where we unmask, and then we have to go back to wearing masks. No, I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think the government's going to insist that people wear masks in a year. We're dealing with an exceptional pandemic. So here's another thing that I disagree with Godward Podcast. So that I disagree with him on this and that doesn't mean that I'm denigrating him as a totality, or denigrating his show, denigrating his Twitter feed. But this notion that essentially that COVID's just a joke and that governments are imposing these lockdowns for no good reason. This is just completely delusional thinking that unfortunately a lot of people on the distant right seem to be prone to. And it kind of springs from this right-wing populist attitude that the elites hate us and want us dead, and therefore we can feel free to reject everything that elites have told us. Melky might just mean professional managerial class jobs. But there's nothing wrong with doing a professional job. If you're running a Taco Bell, there's nothing dishonorable or phony about running a Taco Bell. There's nothing dishonorable or phony about operating a cleaning company. There's nothing dishonorable or phony in being a social worker inherently, or in being a bureaucrat with the Department of Motor Vehicles, right? All jobs usually have the potential to be of service to other people, and that's a wonderful thing. WHO discourages lockdowns at this stage. They're best avoided. Well, it depends on context. Sometimes, apparently, lockdown is like the last resort, but at a certain level of lives saved, you can make an argument for it. What there is no space to argue is that COVID is nothing. The COVID is just the flu. It's clearly far more than the flu. We have over 1 million cases of COVID in Los Angeles County. More than 1 in 10 people in Los Angeles County have COVID. Like in Los Angeles County, we've got 200, 300, sometimes 700 people, several hundred people are often dying a day from COVID. So yeah, it's clearly more serious than the flu. We've got approximately 500,000 dead Americans, 500,000 excess deaths in 2020. So I don't have strong feelings on what is the appropriate response. The only strong feeling I have is to deny the severity of the challenge that we face. Wow, Abu says, I had COVID and now I have narcolepsy. I'm 37. Yeah, you can oppose certain public health measures without disputing the severity of COVID. So I don't have strong opinions on what should be the government response to COVID, generally speaking. I do have one very strong opinion. We should allow challenge trials. So we had this vaccine January 30th, January 13th. We should have allowed people to volunteer to take the vaccine, because the risks of the vaccine are pretty minimal, pretty low, pretty rare. And we had good reason to believe that back in January, a year ago. So we could have forestalled the lockdowns. We could have forestalled, millions of people dying from this. If we'd simply allowed challenge trials in January and February, then we could have been spreading the vaccine out in March. We wouldn't have had the lockdowns. We wouldn't have had this massive loss of life. So I don't agree with Godwin promoting anti-lockdown protests. So by saying that, I'm not saying that I always support lockdown, but I don't think massive anti-lockdown protests are the wise way to go too. That's surely a way to spread something that is going to cost a lot of lives. And I don't believe that life should be valued over every other value. All right, lockdowns do take a toll. There are very strong arguments not to make lockdowns, but to just make light of COVID, I think, is incredibly irresponsible. And Allison says government data shows that the average death from COVID is 84. So who is Godwin? Here, I'll put Godwin as Melky. So Melky's my friend. I love Melky. And he's got some interesting and useful things to say. I'm just drawing attention to a few things that he says that I strongly disagree with. But I mainly want to talk about this notion that Richard Spencer gave, that Trump brought out the worst aspects in me. So I think we need to be aware of circumstances, substances, people, clubs, groups, religion, politics, orientations that bring out the worst in us, right? There are definitely people who bring out the worst in me. And there are situations that bring out the worst in me. And there are probably certain topics that I get onto that bring out the worst in me. So I don't think it's absurd when Richard says Trump brought out the worst aspects of me. So recognizing that other people, other substances, other contexts can bring out the worst in us is not blaming them for our bad behavior. It's recognizing that who we are is profoundly affected by who we're talking to, what the context is. All right, we are all contextually affected. All right, we are not immune to context. We all affect other people. No, I don't think this is Spencer avoiding personal responsibility. Like if let's say Josh, you said smoking crack brings out the worst in me. You're not saying that you're not responsible for the things that you do when you're smoking crack. You're just recognizing that there's a certain substance that brings out the worst in you. So if Trump is bringing out the worst aspects of you, that does shine a light about who you are. It means that you're a volatile, dangerous, highly changeable, person with, probably various personality disorders. Like it's narcissists. I can speak from experience. People with a grandiose personality disorder or borderline personality disorder who are so profoundly affected by other people that they can completely transform in ways that it makes them unrecognizable. So I think we need to take note of what people, what substances, what processes, what contexts, what clubs, what groups, what religious organizations, what political organizations bring out the worst in us, and avoid them. And also recognize that, whatever politics we embrace, let's say it's right-wing populism, that there is a potential downside to that. So just be aware of the downside. Dissident right should support vaccination. What's the worst possible outcome? Double autism. Okay, so let me take a quick gander here through the chat. Abusers always seek to silence those they abuse. That is why I believe social media censorship is dangerous to nations that believe in human rights. John says Trump brought out the best in me. Bab says, glad to see Ford is back on his Spencer queer. So this is not really about Richard Spencer. This is to use a statement by Richard Spencer to illustrate an important point. That is that we need to be cognizant of people, places, substances, contexts, groups that bring out the worst in us. Pastor in the sheets, sinner in the streets. I'm a centrist elitist, says Philip. I just happen to be egalitarian yet anti-woke. Transparency says I strive to not let my ego be attached to my ideas. Trump unleashed ideas. Elite know that ideas not following their narrative may be dangerous. Yes. So just because ideas are dangerous for certain elites, it doesn't make them wrong. And just because ideas may be dangerous to play with does not make them wrong. Right? Some people can't handle certain facts about history or certain theories about history. So what's in the closet? Okay, you guys want to see what's in my closet? There you go, mate. I'm out of the closet. Amazon banned Parler, but allows people to buy this shirt from their website, Kill All Republicans. So I suspect that when this is brought to Amazon's attention, they will remove a t-shirt that says Kill All Republicans. So if you stand for anything, if you have any standards, you will always become liable to being accused of being a hypocrite, right? So I got lots of dress shirts in the cupboard. I've got my laundry. I got some sweaters. Got some tech equipment. I got all my old issues of the Prager Perspective and Ultimate Issues, Dennis Prager's former newsletter. Richard Spencer brought out the worst in so many impressionable young white men. Think of the suicides post Charlottesville that destroyed careers. Yes. So I've got my Essentia down here. So that's where I keep my Essentia, right by the door. So I can get to it when I need it. And what else have I got? Okay, I've got my mattress here that's kind of curved. See the curve? So it helps with the sleep apnea. Got my old green screen here. And my protein cereals, chocolate crunch, my toilet paper, paper towels, my sugar-free hot chocolate, my nasal wash, Diet Pepsis. What else do I have? I got a few ties, a lot of tech equipment in here. Got, lighting bulbs, laundry, dress shirts, some books, my Aussie hat, chessboard. No cherry Coke, mate. No cherry Coke. Okay. Luke, do I like spending time in the closet? No, not really. Trump is a malignant, narcissist, pathological liar, exhibits psychological projection, is a demagogue, a rabble-rouser, a fake, a fraud, incompetent, unfit for office, and a disgrace, says Lawrence. And that may well be true, but he also has many positive aspects. So you could make a long list of horrible traits that I have. I'd like to think I also have some positive aspects. So I still think Trump is the best president we've had since Eisenhower. Holly says fasting and prayer, regular exercise, reading the Bible and the church fathers, fearing God, things that keep me mentally healthy and grounded, not politics. Yeah, it's interesting. I often meet up with people who've been interested in the distant right for years, and they have not collapsed their lives. Their lives are just fine. So you can absolutely navigate dangerous ideas, dangerous ideologies, dangerous times without doing massive, damage to yourself and to other people. And being centered through certain spiritual practices, perhaps certain religious practices, through lots of hard work, can help you do that. I remember there's probably an apocryphal story of Bill Wilson, founder of Alcoholics Anonymous, where he complained to his wife that he'd been out trying to help drunks and he hadn't brought one drunk to sobriety. And his wife said, "But Bill, you are sober." So the habit of trying to be of service to other people helped Bill to keep sober, even if he didn't make any converts. So certain practices, being of service to others, hard work, spiritual practices, can keep one centered in dangerous times. The lockdown doesn't help. People need to have community in real life. Absolutely. People do need community, but you can navigate lockdown better or worse, right? So I have about a dozen sponsees that I'm on the phone with pretty much every day. I play an important role in their life, and by playing a role in their life, it helps my life. I have friends, some I even see in person. We put on masks, we go for a walk, or we meet up and we eat a socially distanced meal. So there are ways that you can navigate lockdowns that are healthier than other ways. So as long as you're engaging in the right spiritual practices, as long as you're staying in touch with people, as long as you're being of service, as long as you've got work you can do. Luke, you should camp for several days in the desert. It will be a revelation. Trump championed the worst part of populism, jingoistic schmaltz with no substance. Like Ann Coulter points out correctly, he bent backward to every Wall Street demand. So I think there's something to that critique, but I don't think it gives Trump enough credit for the good things he does. Yeah, you can run your own business and say what you want politically. If you work for someone else, you may not want to go against their politics. Yeah, being unemployed tends to take a much bigger toll on men in particular than being employed. Sometimes pathological liars are what you need. Yes, sometimes the world needs a pathological liar. Protestant work ethic is coming out of Luke without him realizing it, for real Jews do not have a tradition of hard work. That's not true. So in the Ten Commandments, the fourth commandment about keeping the Sabbath says 1 day a week you shall keep it holy, 6 days a week thou shalt work. So the Protestant work ethic was prefigured by Jewish practices for thousands of years. I had hundreds of physical jobs, says Jim. I never met a Jewish person as a bricklayer, electrician, laborer, manufacturer worker, but plenty in my legal profession. Yeah, generally speaking, Jews don't go into physical labor. Also, you're in a place, likelihood, where there aren't that many Jews. But different peoples are skilled for different jobs. So generally speaking, you're not going to find Jews or Asians doing bricklayer. How many Asians are bricklayers? How many Asians are electricians? How many Asians are laborers? How many Asians are manufacturing workers? Not many. Philip Daniel says the problem is not so much toxicity as institutionally disapproved toxicity. Certain form of toxicity are incentivized, and others will condemn you to total ostracization and social death. Yes, so need to know what's the reality of the world around you, and what articulating or promoting a certain politics online may do to your most valuable connections. Josh says, I know an incredibly successful Jewish contractor in construction. Lawrence says, calling Trump a populist is giving him too much credit and dignifying him more than he deserves. Dennis says, I'm Jewish and I'm working class. Truth says, I despise the fact that Trump felt the need to talk about what he was doing for Black Americans and brown Americans, but never white Americans. The fact that most alt-right accounts are anonymous tells you everything you need to know. A lot of people were just toying with ideas or treating it as a video game, and most who doxed disappeared. What are you worried about, Luke? This is not a face that is consumed with worry, right? I do 20 hours of live streams a week. You don't see worry constricting me. You don't hear worry strangling my voice. You don't see worrying pulling me down. You don't see worrying giving me contorted, disturbing, just weird tension patterns. I am not someone who is filled with worry. I believe that 500,000 additional deaths in the United States in 2020 is not a good thing. So if being concerned about 500,000 extra deaths in the United States in 2020 constitute worry, then I plead guilty to that. Whoa, I got a super chat. Abu says, thanks for the great content. It helped me through some difficult time last year. What are your thoughts on Nick Fuentes and the Groyper movement? It seems to have overall been more destructive than constructive. It seems to have led people to a conspiratorial mindset, to automatically dismissing anything that comes from the mainstream news media. On the other hand, I'm sure it's also helped people. So I don't know if I could assess it overall as being more positive or more damaging to people. Nick is certainly highly skilled at what he does. He's very good at extemporaneous speaking. He's very funny. On the other hand, it does seem that the deeper people get into the Nick Fuentes perspective, that does seem to have a toxic effect on many. Brian says, I got COVID, just felt tired for 2 days, lost my sense of smell. Normal flu can also have devastating effects. Yeah, but when they tell us that, normally 20,000 people a year die of the flu in the United States, this is just, some made up abstraction, right? Do you know anyone who's died from the flu? Can you name any celebrity who's died from the flu? So the problem is that certain health professionals have been lying to us, and then that produces a cynicism when they're telling us something important. So we have not had 20,000, 50,000 people a year dying from the flu. That's a made-up statistic for various well-intentioned reasons by our health professionals. So just like when people try to make the argument that looking at pornography causes rape, it sounds noble to try to discourage people from looking at porn, but pornography is not a major cause of rape, because in countries with pretty free access to porn like Japan or Scandinavia, there's been comparatively very little rape. Jacko says, what I found amusing is that Millennial Woes complained about the lockdown when he never left his house in the first place. Yeah, so this is my desk. It's a standing desk. I can raise it or lower it. So here we go. So it's not electronically, not raising it electronically. I just lift it up. And now I'm standing, and I've got my special standing mat. So I just put this on top of my regular desk. I think I bought it for less than $200 on Amazon. Yeah, so I don't sit very much, but I don't think it's good necessarily to stand 8 hours a day either. So I find it helpful to kind of vary it between standing and sitting. Oh, Buddy got the vaccine yesterday. That's right, he's a vital healthcare worker. In 3 weeks, I'll get the second injection. The Luke podcast has helped me not sniff petrol from a can. Luke, you should deadlift. I should deadlift. Unfortunately, something snapped in my system, so I've been unable to do strenuous exercise since age 21, since February of 1988, without getting sick. So, for example, yesterday I rode my stationary bike for 10 miles. So about 10, 12, 15 miles of riding my bike or walking is about my limit. Anything like strenuous, such as deadlifting or running, for whatever reason, I just get like a flu-like attack immediately afterwards and just lays me low. So unfortunately, since February of 1988, I've had to live fairly moderately. I used to work out all the time. Like I used to have a routine where I'd do 120 pull-ups and 1,400 push-ups in less than 30 minutes and then go for a 3-mile run. Fortunately, I can't do that anymore. Why are so many nurses at hospitals avoiding vaccination? Because it doesn't necessarily attract a high IQ crowd. Right? Nursing has a lot of people with fairly modest IQs. I read that some are afraid the vaccine could make them infertile. Yeah, like with every medical thing, there are always like warnings of possible side effects. But becoming infertile, okay, understandably that's a possible side effect. People don't want to become infertile. But the question is, what are the chances? Like if your chances of becoming infertile from taking the vaccine are 1 in a million, that's very different than if your chances are 1 in 5. So, I mean, look at the side effects from modafinil. I've been taking modafinil for about 8 years and never had any side effects beyond smelly urine. But if you look up modafinil side effects, they say headache, dizziness, difficulty falling asleep, drowsiness, nausea, diarrhea, constipation, gas. They're really mild and really rare. Nosebleed, excessive thirst, flushing, sweating, tight muscles, back pain, confusion. Like they list off all these side effects, but very rare. Like it's about as safe a medication as you can get. So just because there's some theoretical possibility that you could go infertile from getting vaccinated, the question is, what are the chances? Is the chances 1 in a million, or are the chances 1 in 5? So they probably have to list those chances of going infertile, even if the odds are only 1 in a million or 1 in 100,000. So I suspect that the vaccine is not going to cause hundreds of thousands of people to become infertile. Luke, you really believe in the system, as opposed to what? Okay, if you want to replace this system, as you always say on every chat, Jim, you load the system, you want to replace the system. Okay, replace it with what? Give me an example of a better, more effective system. You want a system like Switzerland? Do you want a system like Japan? Do you want a system like Israel? Like, what do you want to replace the American system or the Australian system with? So you can complain about this system all you like, but what's the alternative? What are you going to replace it with? When government says do this, do you comply? Well, tell you what, if you want an easy, pleasant, workable life, you would do well to not go to war with the government. Now, there are some laws that government enforcement takes much more seriously than others. So law is not just what's on the books. Law is what is enforced, what is practiced. So you may have 100-kilometer speed limit on a freeway, but everyone's driving by you at a minimum of 120 kilometers an hour. Right? Obviously, the 100-kilometer-an-hour speed limit is not being enforced. You could safely drive up to 120 kilometers an hour without any chance of getting a driving ticket. So I don't think it's helpful to think of the law solely in terms of what's on the book. What's more important is, what is the law in effect? Like, how do people observe and enforce it? So some laws government takes very seriously, and if you oppose government in those ways, you're going to be in a whole heap of hurt. Just because the government says to wear a mask doesn't make wearing a mask automatically wrong. John says right-wing conspiracy theories about vaccines and Bill Gates are incredibly stupid and bad optics. I 100% agree, and a lot of my chat was, giving me all this conspiratorial nonsense about Bill Gates. On the other hand, Bill Gates and his foundations and government spending didn't bring us the vaccines. It was brought to us by Moderna and Pfizer and these private pharmaceutical companies. They came up with these vaccines. Allison says there's more risk of damage from side effects from vaccination than from catching COVID. Well, we've got about 500,000 extra dead Americans in 2020 due to COVID. So you're saying that you'd have more than 500,000 dead Americans from taking the vaccine? I don't believe that. Luke, you really believe in the system? That is a sign of a compliant mind. You're not inquisitive. I think I'm pretty highly inquisitive. The question is, if you want to get rid of this system, how would you do it? What would you replace it with? See Gilad Atzmon's latest post on the result of widespread vaccination resulting in a rise in cases. So does Gilad Atzmon have any expertise with regard to COVID and vaccinations? Gilad Atzmon, he has a rhetorical style very similar to, the ranting homeless man. That's what he sounds like, a ranting homeless man when you read his writing. Look, 30 people just died in Norway having been injected by the vaccine. What is your view? My view is, I don't know. I've heard that talked about. It's tossed about. 30 people died in Norway. I don't know the story. So no one says that if you take the vaccine that you'll then become immune from death. The question is, will it make you more likely or less likely to suffer from some kind of fatal disease like COVID? Is that sound absorbing material? Yes, it is. So I've got a lot of sound absorbing material, but I've only done it in a part of my room. I've got a lot more work to do. Josh says, I got nauseous from really heavy lifting a few times. He writes pretty well considering English is his second language. I guess it's a matter of taste. To me, it always sounds like he's shouting. He sounds like a shouting homeless man. Which isn't to say that he doesn't have some interesting ideas. I am not planning to move to Austin. I love Beverly Hills. I love Los Angeles. I love California. I've lived most of my life in California. I've lived about 40 of the last 42 years in California. So I know a lot of people here. Josh says, I've been completely outgoing during COVID. I feel for the people forced to work from home and that are not doing well from the lockdown. Trump is a tragic hero. His fate is to be loathed by the nation he tried to save. Liddell is spot on. There was a time when Richard Spencer tried to be more like Greg Johnson and not more like Matt Heimbach. Do you want my home address? So I spend my life in West Los Angeles. That includes Beverly Hills and Santa Monica and Brentwood and Bel Air. I love West Los Angeles. Oh, Colin Liddell here. I think Andy and I brought out the best in Richard Spencer when he got in with the TRS, the Right Stuff, TWP, Traditional Worker Party crowd. That brought out the worst in him. Nothing to do with Trump. That's interesting. Yeah, so definitely the crowd that you get with can have a profound effect on you. And you don't have to be fleeing from personal responsibility to admit that. Luke, it is advisable to always carry a portable jump start in your vehicle. My battery died several hours ago, and now I can't go anywhere till it charges. Yeah, I always carried jumper cables. Yes, I love Beverly Hills. I love Bel Air. I love Brentwood. I love West LA. I love Santa Monica. And I've lived in West Los Angeles pretty much since 1994. I like Holmby Hills as well. So it's a gentle beauty in Los Angeles. It's not a spectacular beauty like San Francisco, not a spectacular beauty like Sydney. Sydney is spectacularly beautiful. San Francisco, the beauty will take your breath away. The beauty in Los Angeles is much more gentle than that.